All right. Welcome to another edition of Undefined. It's been a minute, but glad to be back. I'm Ben Meangwa, the host, and we have here with us a special guest, a friend and a colleague, Dr. Murtala Sani. But I will allow Dr. Sani to do the introduction, to tell us about himself. Just a brief introduction to get us going.
Okay, well, like you said, my name is Murtala Sani, and I completed my PhD in University of Manitoba, the Arthur Moore Center for Peace and Justice. And I currently teach at, the university, extended education. And on the side as well, I, do have a business managing about 10 employees. So that's what I do currently.
Oh, wow. Fantastic. We're going to get to certainly the business, the
Mhm.
intellectual, and everything else in between. So I'm going to start with Manitoba. I know that I met you in Manitoba, precisely where you mentioned the institutes, the Moro Institute for Peace and Justice. That was in 2014, I think.
Yeah.
I was introduced to you in absentia that there is this very charismatic fellow from Nigeria, and that I ought to meet him. And then you barge in. I think we both remember that day very
The
well.
bags.
You barge in with the bags. I think you went grocery shopping.
Shopping, yeah, grocery shopping.
Yeah, your two hands were well occupied, and you had your bag again. I was like, wow, the struggle is real.
Yeah, temporary
So
bachelor era.
exactly. Well, so I was like, oh, geez, this is quite a charismatic, determined, courageous
Mhm.
fellow, and I think that was where it started for us.
Yeah.
Could you just give us a little bit of maybe insight into how you got to Winnipeg and what motivated your interest in peace and conflict studies leading up to your PhD?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was really interesting because, I had, gone to the UK actually to, to study for my master's. And, back in England, I got, through with the master's program and I got to a point where, I started working actually after, my master's. I worked with a bank, HSBC Bank. And the UK at the time, changed their laws, and part of the things that we had to do was to either prove that we had, a particular threshold of income, or leave the country. So for me, to be honest, I had a conversation with my, managers then, and it wasn't happening. And I said to myself, I was just gonna leave. So I got to that point where, going back home was the thing for me. And this was in 2013, I think, yeah. So I got back to Nigeria, and coincidentally that year I got married.
Mm.
And I started living my life, just settling back home and, trying to get used to, the Nigerian way of doing things again. And then I realized very quickly that a lot had changed, from, 2010 when I left Nigeria up until 2013 when I got back fully, you know. And because I got married at the time, I started thinking really that, this is, a place to stay. I'm home, I'm, building a family and all of that. And then suddenly I got a phone call actually that there was a bomb blast. I don't know if you remember, there was this Banex, Banex Plaza. And my wife used to work for a bank, a Nigerian bank, and she happened to work very close to that plaza where the bomb blast happened. And I couldn't tell you how I managed to get to that place.
Mm.
I got into that location, tried to, make that phone call to check if she was okay. And then thankfully she was, but obviously the effect of that bomb blast was fratricidal. So I managed to get her home, went to the hospital, did some few checkups because she was, pregnant at the time. And yeah, I started thinking that night, how did we get here? Because even in 2013, when I got back in Abuja at the time, it was very difficult to move around. I mean, imagine having lived in England for, 3 years, you couldn't go to the cinemas, you couldn't go to any public gatherings because of security concerns. So even that in itself was something that I had to adjust to. And then I realized that after that bomb blast, I started to talk to myself about how did we get here as a people? Nigerians are people who love life. So to think that someone would detonate bombs on themselves and, go into a public space was something that I just couldn't, imagine. So I started thinking about how did you get here? And one of the things that came to my mind was how are we able as a people, even, policymakers, how are we able to prevent, some of these things from happening? And, that really got me thinking, following my master's degree program in, globalization and governance, I started to think about, going back to England. But I had a conversation with a friend, even before I left the UK, and we had, talked about Canada. So I, reached back to her and said, look, I'm thinking about coming back just to do a PhD program, to kind of interrogate, the root causes of this conflict that we are experiencing in Nigeria. And she said to me, she said, look, she reminded me actually of our conversation about Canada. And she said, as she's speaking to me right now, she's actually on her way to University of Alberta. And so that kind of was the, I think the basis on which so immediately we had that conversation. I looked up University of Alberta, and then I looked up the University of Manitoba because they had a dedicated program to peace and conflict studies. And then I sent emails to those two schools, and the impression that I got from the response from who turned out to be my my supervisor, Sean Bird, was very impressive. Right. And so it was on that basis I got in here. And to be honest, I did no research about Winnipeg or Manitoba. I just saw myself here after that conversation with Dr. Rikia, who's currently also doing something in Calgary. So that's how I got here.
Okay. So many things to kind of draw from what you've shared with us. One of which actually is quite in line with my research endeavor at the moment, which is looking at why people return to where they come from. Right. You attempted a return in 2013, and that bomb blast incident was again what got you a little bit unsettled about your settling in Nigeria.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think for many people, the security situation for sure is one of the reasons why they cannot contemplate going back home. And for many, they have lost family members and all. But if you would advise, given that this is also my area of research, people who are contemplating this idea of going back, like physically actually returning to Nigeria, but also maybe there are other ways of doing so. How have you maintained links with the country? I mean, your intention was to go back and give your all to the country, but eventually you had to leave for the safety of your family. But in what ways have you maintained a relationship with the country?
I mean, well, it's interesting because even though I live, and I have my family here in Canada, I honestly do not even consume the Canadian news. I'm very much abreast with happenings back in Nigeria. I connect with friends, talking to family members, my parents, and all of that. So, you get a sense of what's happening almost on account of, on a daily basis, right? Whether it's with regards to, kidnappings, even roads that are unsafe, to, things like even the economic problems. You're sending 50,000 naira home at a point and you're getting calls to say, look, we appreciate 50,000, but honestly, it's not doing anything for us, and I mean, to even friends that reach out to you and people who you feel you're kind of, on pretty much the same level with, but they're telling you that, look, people who they have, full-time jobs, and they are constantly always asking for handouts because you get a sense, that, look, things are not, going well back home. So from just my interactions with friends, with families, and the fact that I'm, very interested in what's happening in Africa and particularly in Nigeria, that's one way I've actually,
Mm,
maintained
mm.
uh, contacts with happenings back in Nigeria.
Yeah, and yeah, I can certainly attest to that. I
Mm.
used to I used to give you all encomium. So being that person that I don't know how you do it, but you have a way of maintaining relationships with people, particularly people in Nigeria. Your line is open 24/7, and it's something that I will always give you credit for. And indeed, you are that person that, you're really good with communication. You know what they say, if there is that person when, you call the person, they answer, you're gonna lose whatever. I will
Yeah.
certainly not call you. I know you're gonna answer. So that is really fantastic. The other thing that you mentioned is your business acumen.
Right.
Uh, I don't know if that has to do with, I know in Nigeria there is all the stereotype about
Mm.
business people are Igbos and Hausas are into politics and
Mhm.
whatnot. But for sure, we from Northern Nigeria also understand business. Uh,
Mhm.
but is there any way that that environment shaped your business acumen? And can you tell us exactly what you do in Winnipeg? And you mentioned that you've even employed 10 people, or I think the
Oh
number
boy.
is increasing by.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's anyways, to be honest with you, I've always been someone who, like the academic environment. So for me, coming to study here in Manitoba was primarily, to kind of get my PhD and see how that in itself would help me, in the academic space. But when I got here, I realized very quickly, I think it was even in my second year, a lot of our folks back home, I mean, things started to turn south economically in Nigeria. And there were demands coming in from, families and all of that. And to be honest, that in so many ways has shaped, me, looking at the business side of things. Because when I began to interact with some of our, even my parents, I say, hey, listen, I'm actually doing this study, and sometimes the demands are much. How am I supposed to meet this demand? I'm supposed to be, focused on research. And one thing that I realized was that no matter how many times I try to explain this to them, there's very limited understanding of what's going on here. Their idea is that you live abroad, you're better off, no matter how you try to explain this. If you change $100 to $200, we should be fine. But I don't think that they understand that even that in itself is something that's difficult for an everyday student to afford. So I thought to myself that, this is something that over time, no matter how you try to manage the situation, you're going to end up being someone who's very selfish. And that changed for me the trajectory of things, because I started to look for ways in which, I mean, I'm the first child in my family. I needed to reach out to, siblings and all of that. So realistically, I started to look at the future and say, okay, so what I started to do at the time, I had a few friends that I met who were, buying one or two vehicles and, shipping back to Nigeria and selling and using, I got involved in that. So at the point I would have, a full container. I had two containers, and that was how I kind of got a sense of, the business world, just being able to get involved, grew a bit of capital. But whilst I was, doing the program, I also had a part-time job with a watch and jewelry company, and they were involved in repairs as well. And somehow I got really interested in the repair aspect of the business. And so I remember my wife saying, I mean, you're doing a PhD. Why are you, interested in watch batteries and, repairing, necklaces and all of that? But I found it really fascinating to see how, people will come and they take care of their jewelry. And it meant so much to them. A lot of the people who come to do repair their jewelry, it has some kind of sentimental value. So they would want to pay anything just to get it repaired, you know. And then I was wondering to myself, this is something people do back home and, you get close to nothing for. So, I kept on, working in that space until about the time I finished, my PhD. Obviously, we started, teaching our third year. So I was teaching, and every time I had, loose hours, I go do the jewelry repair thing and all of that. And once I graduated from the PhD program, I kept on my teaching position. But then I also realized when COVID happened that, this was something that I could, explore. And, I just, looked out for a place to, rent, and one of the malls, prominent malls in Winnipeg. The wife wasn't very happy at the time. She says, you should get full-time teaching. But I really didn't want to do full-time teaching because of all the politics and some of the things that were happening within the university. And I said, okay, I would hold on to this teaching part-time, but I think I want to do this, on the side. And that's how really it started. And 3-4 months down the line, I realized, okay, this looks good. I, got one person on board. I had, someone to manage with me. And as we moved along, we got 2 employees, we got to 3, and then I thought to open a second location. And right now we have 3 locations around the malls in Winnipeg. With, we're doing, an average of $500,000 a year. So, it's really interesting to see that, you could convert your passion into something that, keeps you going. So
Right.
yeah, so basically we do sell jewelries, we sell watches, we sell jewelries of all kinds, necklaces and all, and also do repairs.
Right. Fantastic. What is the wife saying about that now?
Oh yeah, she's she always tends to say I'm the rich one now, and I'm like, so where did the money come from? You know? Yeah, but yeah, I mean, she's just someone that, really wants the best. But sometimes she doesn't see the big picture very early, is what I'll say. But she's an interesting person, and she's been very supportive, at least for now.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for that. I mean, you certainly are one of the few people I know who has been able to combine the intellectual. I mean, it's not to say that these disciplines or fields are mutually exclusive. They are certainly not, because you also teach Canadian
Mhm.
business. Uh,
Yeah,
you've been teaching at the college, the Institute of Trade and Technology. We've also been teaching at Manitoba Extended Education Program.
yeah,
And this is really, I mean, a brilliant strategy for also enriching your teaching, because I know certainly when we were together that a lot of your students benefited from you.
oh
A
yeah,
lot of your students, are always coming to you for mentorship. You've been able to fix so many different places of work,
right.
providing references, all your links, and so on. So
Mhm.
you're indeed a treasure to that community, and for that. And I also know personally, people that you have also employed to
Mhm.
support us, and for that we are grateful.
Mhm.
And I just want to, since we are still talking about Winnipeg, I heard a very sad news recently of a student being shot, or let's put it plainly, being killed by the Winnipeg police. Do you have any news on that to share with us, a Nigerian student?
Oh well, I don't know that someone was shot. I mean, again, because of the business side of things, I've
Yeah.
actually been really engrossed in managing people. And that's the extent to which I find even the discipline, peace and conflict really, really useful. You know, the toughest part of running a business, as far as I know, in my experience, is managing people. People really want to get paid for, doing absolutely nothing. And sometimes you tend to try as much as possible to be on the ground. This is not something that is unique to other parts of the world. We see it here every day, where people just want to get paid for doing next to nothing, unless, of course, you mandate them to do what's right. And so, having 3 locations has really kept me very busy. On top of that, I have my teaching obligations and all of that. So to tell you the truth, it's something I'm really trying to work on for this year, to try as much as possible to consume even the local news. So a lot of things happen within Winnipeg here, and I'm like, I'm not even aware. So even this you said to me now is completely strange.
Yeah, I mean, you've made it clear that you have been busy with other things and involved with Nigerian politics. And talking about Nigerian politics, I think you're working on something uh,
Yes,
which is based on the slogan. Uh,
right.
Nigerians have a way of coming up with these slogans,
Yes,
every now and then. And sometimes at the beginning of a new year, right? Particularly you go to revivals and, we have a year of abundance, a year
right.
of goodness, my year of conquering and so on and so forth. The new slogan today is we no go gree for anybody. It's something that you took particular interest in.
Yes.
Do you want to run us through? I think you wrote a short piece, which I think is yet to be published, but I'm sure in a few days it's going to be out there. Do you want to run us through your interest in that slogan?
Yeah, well, like you said, the tradition really in Nigeria has always been, people talk about crossover nights. And you tend to hear people often sending messages out, a night prior to the new year, saying, "Oh, if I did anything to you last year, forgive me. We're getting into a new year." And they often start the new year with some kind of, hope, a unity, sending some kind of message. And part of what I did in that, brief article was to kind of see that, to echo that shift that I've seen, instead of the new year on the 1st of January and everywhere, we know we'll agree for anybody, and I'm like, what's this? Like, this is a complete shift from what we are used to seeing, typically there will be a theme that often sends a message of hope, message of prosperity and all of that. And everyone will hold on to that, at least for the first quarter of the year, you know. So, but this time around, there tend to be a different approach. Everyone says they no go agree for anybody. And you wonder what that really means. And for me, just looking at it and even the way that it's being used, you find a sense that people are really resistant to something. And part of what I try to do in that article is to look at what are some of the things that this resistance could really impact on if we take on this we're not going to agree for anybody, through the year. I mean, the current government in Nigeria tends to talk about renewed hope. And I try to create a linkage between how this renewed hope could emanate from the constant use and of course the conscious use of this we're not going to agree for anybody. And also try to talk about the fact that we tend to in the Nigerian parlance say it's cruise. Hopefully that people are not just using this to catch cruise, rather to see that this is something that could actually be used for their own collective good.
Mm, mm, I mean, it's remarkable to see this. I see it as some sort of groundswell resistance, like you said, to some of the issues people have been facing. I just wish that it would be channeled or targeted at the right people, that is the government, right? That this sense of resistance, not agreeing, let me
Hmm.
the proper English.
Yeah.
But let's leave it as it is.
Yeah.
Not agree for anybody. Let it be targeted to, we not agree, for the government, we not agree for all their nonsense and so on. And hopefully, Nigerians will start demanding, for good governance, demanding for the dividends of what, they are supposed to get from the resources of the land and so on. So that is really my hope that they will not channel it, to the wrong people. Right? The everyday people are also trying in their ways not to grieve for anybody. Uh,
Right.
but that they will channel it to the people, that matter. Thank you. I think that is quite a great intervention. We are certainly on the lookout
Mm.
for the piece.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the time and wouldn't want to waste much. We would like you to carry on with your work.
Mm.
Any since Nigerians came up with "We Not Agree for Anybody," what are you coming up with for this year? What are the plans in terms of research, business, and much else? Just to leave us with maybe something to inspire our our viewers.
Well, for me, to be honest, I've really enjoyed the mix of, being in the academic space, just doing the teaching on a part-time basis, interacting with students and all of that. But I'm really also enjoying the business side of things. Before now, I used to have my business interests, go back home, kind of look at opportunities back in Nigeria. But of course, with the exchange rates problems and all of that, I've really decided to stay local, to focus on doing my thing here. One thing that I do know is that from the business space, I see opportunities on, hiring even from abroad. And that's really my next phase because, for the business, we've gotten to that place where we qualify for, certain benefits. And so I'm looking to see how I can use, my business really to grow an African community here in Canada. So really, that's where I'm at.
It's
And
like
that's the
you,
plan for the rest
it's
of the
like
year.
you serve no one grief for
I
anybody.
don't agree.
We've gone international. This is really
Yeah,
music to my ears.
yeah.
And just for the purposes of those who are interested in your business, what is the name of the business?
Swift quartz. So the quartz is basically, coming from, watches, right? And the idea is that, we're very swift in repairs. Typically, really in Canada, what happens is, if you want to even change a watch battery, you go into a regular watch store. They will take in the watch and tell you, hey, you know what? This is going to be ready in 5 days. So for me, Swift Quartz really sends a message of, swift repair, swift response. We tell you really that, it only takes 5 minutes to change watch batteries and it takes 5 minutes to clean your jewelry. And so that's where, and so sometimes while you're waiting to get the repairs done, we now have very nice jewelries on display and watches and, you now have something to buy. So Swift Quartz Watch and Jewelry Repair is the name of the business. And like I said, we're in 3 malls in Winnipeg, and we're looking to expand.
Yeah, long may your business live, long may
Amen.
you live, and doing all the great things for the Winnipeg community, the international community, as we've just heard. And thank you so much for taking that time out of your business and work to talk with us today, to inspire us with what you do. And we wish you everything of the best for this year, for you
Thank you.
and your family. So stay well, enjoy what is left of the winter.
Not good. Not good. Thank you
Hope
very
you
much, my brother.
cheers,
Yeah,
my friend.
have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.